It's currently a private chat, just me and you, buddy. It's like it's like a phone conversation. All right, what is up, guys? Coach Mac, Play Fast Football. Good Tuesday evening to all of you. I hope everybody is doing well. If you are in the teaching world, like I am, and my buddy Joe is or was, then hopefully December is going to wrap itself up real shortly as we get close to Christmas and the holidays. So you've got to hang in there to be able to get through the next 2 weeks before finals or whatever your schedule is so that you can get through to Christmas break. And then all the good stuff starts from there: bowl games, a bunch of time off, getting ready for the off season, getting ready for New Year. So hopefully all of that is going well. Happy December to everybody. Figured we'd start off with the elephant in the room, and that's obviously the college football playoff, right? So everybody has their opinion on it. Everybody wants to give their opinion on it. You know, the bottom line is, as long as you have humans in the room and humans are making that decision, I don't think anybody is ever going to agree on what four teams should be in. Um, I don't know if it was better when we had a computer system with analytics, but now that we have humans involved, there's going to always be other discussions. There's going to be connections and money and ESPN and who's tied to who and all that other good stuff. So I don't think we're ever going to get around that, going to 8 teams, 12 teams, whatever they do in the future. Um, the ninth team or the 13th team is going to feel left out. So obviously, that's not really going to solve the issue as much. I think it sorts itself out a little bit better with 8 or 12 teams, but I still think you're going to have an issue because somebody's going to think that they should have been in, whether it was the 8 team or the 9 team. But, unfortunately, for Florida State, there's really not much that you can do. You took care of everything you needed to take care of. You won every game that you played. You scheduled 2 SEC teams and you beat them. You won your ACC championship game. The hard part for FSU is it's really not their fault that LSU ended up with 3 losses and Florida had 6 losses. The 2 SEC teams that you scheduled end up being absolutely, down from where you thought they would be when you scheduled them. The rest of the ACC is not very good. So unfortunately, you get stuck with the strength of schedule issue that, as much as they want to say strength of schedule, the bottom line is they didn't want to put FSU in with a backup or a third string quarterback. Um, when they did have Jordan Travis, the 2-point win against BC didn't help very much. And then when he gets hurt, struggling against Florida early in the first half, only scoring 25 or 26 points, and then struggling to only score 16 against Louisville. I think the bottom line is with the committee, they probably were worried about, lopsided games. I think I know uh, a couple, Stephen A. Smith or some other people mentioned the TCU game last year getting beat 65-7 in a championship. Obviously, I think they were scared of that, but you can go back as many years as the college playoffs have been around. And, you can also figure out that there's been blowouts all the time. So, uh, a lot of games were not close, even with the top 4 teams. So I don't think that should be an argument. How do you coach the zero technique? What's his base fit? All right. So our nose is a lag technique. Um, when we start in base, which means he's going to play behind the head of all the center's blocks. So he should end up in the backside A gap on on every scheme. We do not move him to start off, depending on depending on the type of player it is. If it's a smaller player or somebody that is, um, no, I have never tilted our nose, Pete. Pete, I don't know if you know from back in the day, Joe Delgaze, who was my college coach at St. John's University, but I think also might have coached a year or two, maybe with um, Tom Marshall at CW Post. Joe, that I don't know if you know the name Pete Porcelli, but I think played with Chris at CW Post, a Long Island guy. So we've currently got, um, yeah, I read that a couple weeks ago, Pete. That's terrible. Um, we've got actually got a couple Long Island guys, a couple older fellas that all know the Long Island connection. We don't push the nose, Coach Gardner. I have not done that yet. We do not we do not push the nose front side. No. Yeah, Brian Collins was a big over G front guy. You know, their cover eight stuff, the old robber stuff, 8-man front Virginia Tech robber stuff was kind of Brian Hughes' deal, and our buddy Frank Chimenti, who was his defensive coordinator for a while, so that was their deal. Pushing the nose, like Coach Gardner's talking about, would be playing them to the front side of blocks. We're not good enough to do that. So we move him from time to time when we need to, based on the player, or if he's not doing a good job. I think the easiest thing to do, especially if you have a physical nose with a decent get off, I think the easiest thing to do is when you play a lag technique, you just try and tell him to get off the ball and play through the center's face mask and out the other side of his ass. And if you do that, if you get off the ball that hard, every back block zone scheme you find, you're going to end up behind that. When we had, when we do that, I think for the lag technique, it's kind of like when you get guys that get reached because their balls ass off the ball and they come straight forward all the time and they don't read anything. And, then they end up getting reached. Well, if you do that with the nose and he gets reached, he's going to lag. He's going to be in the backside A gap. So I have never played him with a push technique. Hopefully we have a kid that eventually can play the front side of center blocks. If we had tendencies, anything like that, we would move the nose or the front. A lot of times in tight, we just move the nose. We don't move the front. We did play a game this year where we slanted too tight. We kind of pinched the B gaps from 5 techniques because we were really small this year up front. D linemen were about 180 pounds, 185 and 190 pounds up front, those 3 guys that we played. So I don't think we played really, unless we used our offensive bodies, we really didn't play anybody over 205 pounds all year long. So, we tried to move a little bit when we needed to. The one thing I think we need to change is our 4 eyes. I think because we have some returning players next year and we're going to be a little bit bigger. Our 4 eyes, we read guards this year. So our visual key was through the guard. And one of the reasons we did that is because of the arc release schemes from the tackle. And we didn't want to get widened out on any read schemes or any trap schemes. So because we started seeing a lot of arc release stuff, we visual keyed the guard so that if the guard was a down block player, then we squeezed. If the guard, was out towards us, then we tried to penetrate yeah, pretty much, Coach Gardner, if that's how you want to, alignment on a tackle, visual key or pressure key was the tackle, visual key was the guard. But the problem with that is when you're getting gap schemes or you're getting zone schemes away from you, when your visual key is the guard and you can't get hands on the tackle and you're 185 pounds, you end up getting washed so far inside that, I know a lot of people I talk to, my Joe Delgaze that's on this chat right now, who coached me in college and still coaches on Long Island. We talk about it all the time about the ball falling off the pool table so quickly, especially in tight front or when you spill in under over fronts and, the ball gets outside and can you run to it? Do you have the speed to get there? Is that really what you want as opposed to vertical entry? But in the tight front, the ball already falls off the pool table pretty quick. It gets to the perimeter. It's going to be on the perimeter. Well, when guys get washed almost a gap and a half inside, now it's really ripping out there. And, you're not really helping your linebackers any. You're not, we didn't make a ton of plays at the 4-eye position this year. So I think what we're going to do next year, because we're going to be bigger, we played a freshman nose and 2 sophomore 4-eyes and a junior 4-eye. So 4 of those kids are going to come back. They're all going to be bigger. They're all going to be stronger. They've got a bunch of reps under their belt already. So I think we're going to go back to visual reading, visual key and tackles and trying to get hands on. So if we get down block schemes or we get, zone away and they're trying to scoop the 4-eye, we can kind of be really physical with the tackle and get our hands on and hold the point in the B gap a little bit more. Going back to your question, Pat, I mean, the only real detail of it is you got to make sure that you're behind all the blocks of the center. So obviously, if we're getting zone stuff, you want to fall back behind it or play behind it. Again, I think the easiest coaching point is to get off the ball 100 miles an hour, and you'll end up behind those blocks anyways. Um, but again, the two inside backers in the tight front have to fix the nose anyway. So if you're trying to play a lag technique and the nose ends up in the wrong A gap, you really don't freak out about it. The backside guy's got to understand, based on flow and what the fits are, he has to understand where the nose is and fit the A gap off him. So you don't need to get that crazy with the technique on the lag stuff, in my opinion. Um, Admiral Shanahan, we are mostly half slide protection. We'll half slide away from the side that the back is going to insert or be in protection on. So the back is to the man side. We half slide. We full slide some things. Some of our play actions are full slide protections. I was always a full slide quick game guy. The school that I'm at currently right now is still half slide and quick game. I think full slide in high school, the issue is you put it back on a defensive end. You can't cut, and you're putting a guy that doesn't do pass pro on a guy that does pass rush every day. But my philosophy in quick game was I wanted to take care of A and B gaps because the ball was going to be out of our hand very quickly because it's a rhythm style passing game. So I never wanted to half slide in quick game and give up potential A or B gap run through when I was trying to get the ball out. Yes, it's the same as your drop back stuff. If you've got a back that's got to pick up an inside backer, or if you get anything that's mugged and the guard blocks down and the back ends up on a three technique, again, what ends up happening is you got a guy that doesn't do pass protection a ton against a guy that pass rushes every day. So, we're basically half slide, full slide, and we live a majority of the time in half slide protection. One of the things that we did that's different from a lot of people, I think, is as a tempo team, we never really checked protections based on pressure. Everything was built into side adjusts and hot reads. And, we once we had plays called, we were trying to snap it so quick that we could avoid pressure. But I know a lot of guys like to check their protection and change where the back goes or change where the center turns. We were never really, I was never, as a tempo team, I was never really big into that. But, basically just old fashioned half slide, full slide. That's pretty much what we do. Let me go back to, all right. So, the first adjustment we made is we probably five-man pressure more than most people do. There were games where we sent five or more 35% of the time. I think we played 774 snaps on defense this year, and there were over 300 pressures. So we pressured like almost 40% of the time this year, something like that. And that's not to get to the quarterback. That's not to get sacks. That's not to get home. It's to affect blocking schemes. It's to try and generate tackles for loss. We pressured on first down a bunch this year, mostly zone pressures, mostly middle of the field closed. And really that's to get people off schedule to try and get some tackles for loss. And one thing we need to do more of is kind of a lot of stuff that Georgia was doing with stemming the front early on, early downs, especially first down, stemming the front, trying to get people to jump off sides. Because if you can get people to jump off sides and it's first and 15, they're behind the schedule. That's just as good or almost as good as a tackle for a loss. If you get a tackle for a loss, you also get a down with it. So if you had a 5-yard loss, a tackle for a 5-yard loss, you'd end up with second and 15 instead of first and 15. But, stemming the front, doing some different things to get people to jump off sides, get them off schedule. We pressured to stop the run. We pressured because we needed to move our guys. So, a lot of long stick, two gap moves, a lot of, the pressures weren't crazy exotic. I've gone into on other videos I've gone into on how simple our blitz family is and what we're trying to do when we pressure. So that's basically what we did. We're not, because we're a tight front, there's not a ton of D-line games. There are some games with the nose. When we get the 4 down, we game a little bit more to the 2-man side. We'll game the open B gap a little bit, but if we were, we probably might benefit from being more of a 3-3 stack movement team because we're lighter. But tight front was good to us the year before. It matches with our three high stuff. So I didn't want to really get away from that. Next year, we may go back to some 3-3 stack stuff. So we don't play a ton of bear front, Pete. We play it some. Um, I think next year bear would be better for us when we have a little bit more presence in the B gap with those bodies. We did pressure a bunch from bear. A lot of our 6-man hot or eyes, however you want to call that pressure, 6-man zone pressure, 2 under 3 deep. A lot of those came from bear front. I like the movements out of bear front. I like the movement of the nose with a plug backer. I like some games with the 3 techniques out of bear front. I wish we were better, or good enough to sit in bear. I love bear as an actual defense. Old school 46 stuff. I think the fits are easy. I think it's good versus a lot of the things we see. Obviously, it's not great for a sprint out. It's not great for a speed option or option football, but I think it's a great change up, and I wish we could play it better. Hopefully next year we'll play it a little bit better when we're big. We're not big enough in the B gaps to really be effective in bear, but we do use it. We use it. It's part of a 5-man pressure deal for us too. We had 2 or 3 different ways this year for us to 5-man pressure and get into bear. So we'll have most of our guys, Pete, lifting in the offseason. Our upper class, our 10th and 11th graders, the majority of them will be in a weight training class. Our freshmen will not be because they have to take health and fitness to graduate. So we start in January with our offseason. So unfortunately, at a small private school, a lot of our kids play multiple sports, which is not unfortunate for them, but it's, the unfortunate part of kids playing multiple sports is you lose them in a weight room unless you have them during the day. We have a lot of our 10th and 11th graders during the day, but we don't have a lot of our freshmen. So they have to come in after school, and you got to hope that they're not playing other sports so that they don't miss their lifts. If they're playing other sports, it doesn't hurt too much because, those sports are good for them. They're going to stay in shape. They're going to move. They're going to gain some, motor skills from playing those other sports. So it's never a bad thing, but for us, we need to really kill it in the weight room. And, the way it's set up with freshmen having to take health and personal fitness or fitness, however you look at it, they're not in the weight room. So that hurts us a little bit. I also coach the weightlifting team. So the majority of our guys that aren't playing baseball, we do some stuff before school in the spring, Pete, but we start at 7:50. So, yeah, why are you on your phone? Fucking dinosaur. Hook it up on your computer. Sorry, guys. Sometimes you got to deal with older people and they just don't get technology. The not Salgado, it's Joe Delgaze, who again, was my receiver coach at St. John's in 90 or 91, and then he was a coordinator from 93 to 96 or 97. But I thought he was an assistant at CW Post one year. But was teaching at Port Washington for a while and then got back into high school. And Joe Delgaze lives in Wantagh, teaches at Port Washington. Yes, Long Island. Yes, 100%, Pete. Good friends or friends with Chris Camera. We all know each other. It's all the same connections. Yes, he coached with Ricka. So did I. I played for Ricka, obviously, and then IGA'd for 2 years. Joe was a coordinator at that time, so I was doing or helping him with his work. When he was, helping him with game plan stuff and other stuff. So let me see. Let me go back here while this Long Island conversation is going on. Do you like to defend 2x2, 12 personnel, H&Y off, heavy gap scheme, 2 to 3 pullers and bull? How do you like to defend 2x2, 12 personnel, H&Y off, heavy gap scheme, 2 to 3 pullers and bull? We would try and play as much quarters to that, Pat, as we possibly can. The problem with H&Y off now is the pullers now become the sniffer tight ends. A lot of the time, you'll still get some one guard pull stuff, but they'll get 2 pullers with, like old counter stuff, GY counter, but they'll also sometimes get 3 pullers. Again, if you're playing tight front or you're playing other stuff, you're going to hope that they can't cut off your 4-eye. Hopefully, a lot of times now teams are pulling a tackle versus tight front, but if they've got a Y or an H off that's next to the tackle, I'm not sure if they can pull a tackle and the Y or the H. It's tough to do. because of the spacing. It usually needs to be a GY scheme, but we would try and play as much quarters to that as we possibly can. Don't like to get in a 3-1 box in our tight front. So a lot of the times we might be in our 3 high stuff. We might be quarters to one side, let the middle safety fit off number 3, and then the backside will either lock it or into the boundary. We'll play some inverted cover 2. We've also played our middle safety at weak side outside linebacker and got into more traditional 3-4 looks and played quarters to both sides. So the issue with that is when they have a really good X or Z receiver. It happened to us in the playoffs this year. They were really big up front. They went into 2x2 H and Y off, a bunch of gap schemes, a bunch of duo schemes, and we got into quarters. But then they have a receiver that's got 50 offers. He's got Alabama, he's got Georgia, he's got a bunch of offers. And anytime you go to quarters, you're kind of man to man on number 1, especially in the quick game. And some other things, you can only get help if 2 is not vertical or if 2 is in a pass protection. But quick game stuff, he's on an island out there, and RPOs we got put on an island. So I don't know why you don't see more of that. I don't know why. I don't know why you don't see more of that 12 personnel H and Y off, because I've always argued that, in the old days, everybody would tell you that the tight end needs to be on the ball to create 3-man surfaces, and it's better for your double teams and angles and things. But when he's on the ball, he's really limited after the snap of what he can do. In today's game with the guys that are off post snap, they can do 9 different things. They're part of the RPO scheme. They can insert, they can wham, crunch, trap people. They can, zone kick, zone bluff the backside. They become pullers in your, some of your power, your counter scheme. So, in today's world, I don't see, you still kind of create an extra gap with that body there, even though he's not attached. Teams have to account for him being a vertical threat. So now that he's outside the tight end, but he's off the ball, he's still a vertical threat. It creates an extra gap. He can do so many things pre-snap and post-snap. In the old days with the Y attached, he can get up and trade. Well, when he got up and trade, everybody would trade their Sam or trade, somebody else. And now with all the short motion that the NFL teams use and all the exit motions and outside motions and short, quick inside motions to get them to the other side, they're gaining bodies without you having a chance to really rotate, spin, move. So I don't know why teams don't, I guess in high school, the problem is finding those 12 personnel guys. But when you find those types of bodies that are, your linebacker types, your tight end, fullback, sniffer types, they're so versatile with what they can do. You have 4 vertical threats right away. You have a ton of the passing game that you would normally throw if those guys are, guys that are able to be receivers. The toughest ones we face are the ones that can actually flex out and be in a slot. And now they can be 10 personnel, within their 20 personnel grouping. They can give you, things that look like 2x2 open 10 personnel. They can give you 3x1. So, I think those are the toughest things when teams do that with tempo and they don't have to change personnel. When you watch the guys in college play and they talk about when people are trying to go tempo and snap the ball to avoid substitutions, that's because their game is so personnel based and substitution based. A lot of the times in high school, I've made this comment several times before that your 11 best guys on defense are probably your 11 best guys. Maybe short yardage goal line, you bring in some big bodies, but you don't have a lot of other bodies to play at most programs. So you're really not making a lot of substitutions or a lot of personnels. You might have an extra backer. If you're a nickel or a dime team as a base, if you're a 4-2-5, 3-3-5 team or, or whatever your personnel is, if you're a nickel dime team as a base, then maybe you bring a Sam backer in for the nickel to get a little bit bigger. If you're a 3-down team, maybe you've got a 4-down package where you bring a D lineman in, but it's very hard to have personnel groupings in high school because a lot of the programs that people are coaching at, it's hard enough to find 11. Like I told you, without using our offensive linemen, our defensive linemen were all under 200 pounds. So if you're playing D linemen that are under 200 pounds, it's kind of hard to have a sub package to begin with. If those are the best guys you got outside of, now we had some short yardage stuff where we brought our O linemen in, but without using our O linemen, we really couldn't get any bigger. So when teams can play everything within the same personnel group, when teams can play 12 personnel and spread you out to 2 by 2 open and go 3 by 1 and do all those things from the same personnel groupings, I think that's makes teams really hard to defend. If all of a sudden, those guys, those two tight ends, they could both go in the backfield and now you've got three back looks. They can both line up on the ball and now you've got, three-man surfaces to each side. So probably the fact that you can't find those guys as much or as easy as you can find receivers in high school, but it's a pain in the ass to defend. Um, especially when guys are really good at gaps and really good, when teams marry the duo schemes with it, and I don't worry about zone as much in high school as from that set as I would more of a gap duo scheme. Um, it makes it tough to defend. You got RPOs off it. You got your flat RPOs or your slice RPOs. You got bluff schemes and read schemes where you can get two escorts out to the perimeter for the quarterback. So, um, it's one of those things where it's kind of a pain in the ass, and I'm glad we don't see it more. So, but we use base 3-4. We would sub for. Yeah, I think most people try to keep their fits the same if they sub in high school. I know we do a lot of the times. We try to play some three high from four down so that our fits don't change too much. So even when you make personnel changes, you try to keep your fits and your spacing the same. So if you're an odd spacing fit, then you try to keep it odd spacing as much as you can, even when you go to even front stuff. So whether you got to gap exchange stuff or you got to, figure out a way to fall back, rock back, or do whatever you need to do to keep it odd spacing, I think that's probably the easiest. I know me and uh, Coach Del Gaze that's on here, we have a conversation all the time about defending certain things from different fronts and how it changes. And certain kids that, are four eyes and now maybe they're fives and they got a spill, or you don't like the guys that come in that, that play the spill technique. And maybe you have a different way of fitting things when you're in four eyes or tight front. So, I think that's the toughest thing about being multiple, especially in high school with the amount of time that we have. In order to be multiple, your fits might change a little bit. And in college, in the NFL, things are so much drastically different. Some of those guys would probably argue we get more time. I don't think we do, but um, I think the issue becomes when you have multiple fits in different fronts. Obviously, anytime you change the coverage, your fits might change a little bit. So now you're talking about changing fronts and changing coverages, changing fits and changing pictures. Um, I know a lot of guys talk about linebacker play and say, look, just you fit, you fit open windows and you scrape closed doors, or whatever you however you want to use the terminology. So no matter what front you play, those guys are always going to get ready to fit. And when the gaps, when you go to even front, they know that the B gap is open, but when you go to tight front, they know that it's closed, so they might be an over the top player or a scrape player. However you want to look at that stuff, I still think the fits change a little bit. So the more you can keep your spacing and your fits consistent. One of the reasons we play tight front is I think it's the easiest scenario for inside backers to fit. I think it's the easiest pictures to fit. I think you're playing A to C gap predominantly almost all the time. And I think it's simple. There's simple flow rules that change whether you're an A gap fitter or a C gap fitter. There's a lot of easy cues you can give the kids. If the back's to me, I'm probably going to fit the C. If the back's away, I'm going to fit the A unless I get a puller. If I get a puller or a crossface mesh, now you just flip it and, to the side of the front, the crossface mesh, that guy's the C gap player and the backside linebacker is the A gap player. But, you can kind of give them simple rules based on backfield sets. If it's an offset back that's to you, if the back's to me, I'm probably going to fall back C. If the back's away, I'm probably going to hammer the A. So, there's so many simple little things like that in tight front that you can use. And we try to keep it the same. We try to gap a lot of things out when we go to over and four down fronts, and we try to stay three high because we funnel a lot of our fits to the middle safety. We're always trying to get the ball to navigate its way to the middle safety. So, unfortunately, when we go too high, that changes. Um, we we only play skills both ways, if that's the question, Coach Gardner. And we try not to start our skills both ways, but most of our backups are two-way players. And the reason we didn't use our O linemen on defense. That's why we were so small, because our biggest bodies were our offensive linemen. So I feel like in high school, I feel like defense is easier to play at times in high school, and you can get away with some shit because the offenses suck on the other team too. So, you know, offense is being able to block people, being able to be disciplined and hold on to the football, not take penalties. I think it's easier to play decent defense with less players than it is if you're in high school and you don't have linemen, or you don't have a quarterback, or you don't have bodies to play. I think it gets tougher to play. Obviously, there's some schemes that can protect that. You can be wing T, you can be flex bone, or whatever you need to be to single wing stuff. But I think, to me, in 24 years of doing this, I think it's easier to play good defense with less players than it is to play good offense with less players. That's just my opinion. Offense takes a lot more execution. There's shit that can go wrong in a hurry. Defense, you can get away with a guy making a play here or there. And so what we chose to do is we chose to go smaller on defense, let all the big bodies play O-line, not use those bodies. And we didn't really we didn't start any skills both ways. So this was the first year that in a long time at the school that I'm at that they didn't use any real two-way starters. We tried to go, full starting one side of the ball only, and depth-wise, it didn't really work for us. We got to a point where our starters were one side of the ball only, but we run out of depth so quickly. But I am actually, guys, believe it or not, I am actually an offensive guy. I played receiver in college. Most of my career was an offensive play caller until when you become a head coach, and this story goes back 25 years, but Joe Delgaze, that's on this live chat right now, was a defense coordinator at St. John's. I worked for him as a GA. When I got my first head coaching job at St. John's, was still playing football in 99. And first thing I did was I went back to him and I said, "Hey, I'm a head coach. I got to learn defense now." And the first thing we did was 3-4 reduction field, quarter, half stuff. So, we set the A shade and the 5 technique to the field. We set the Sam to the field. We played quarter, half, FIB. We played some 3 deep stuff. What he calls field angle 3 swap, which was basically slanting to the boundary, bringing the Sam and dropping the jack. Everybody's now, field creeper, whatever you want to call it now. We were doing that 25 years ago, and it stood the test of time, playing 3 deep behind it and dropping, the weak side outside backer into the boundary and playing 3 deep. So that's that's how I first learned defense, because when you become a head coach, you have to know defense. There's no way you can hire people and say, "Hey, do your job. I trust you." When things don't go right, or you have no input on what's going on in the game plan, you have no input on how to fix anything. So I knew as a head coach, I had to learn defense. So I played defense my entire career. Got recruited to play defense, but I was too small. The first time we did tackling stuff, the first week of camp, I got annihilated. They said, "Hey, you need to go play receiver." So I went and played receiver, and it worked out pretty well for me. So actually an offensive guy at heart. But I like defense now. I think it's interesting. I think there's a lot of great shit out there. But as a head coach, you got to know both. So I was forced to learn defense. So I don't really know. I don't think any of those courses hurt anything, whether it's the Mummy Air Raid certification or the Tony Franklin stuff. Like, I don't think those hurt. I think knowledge is king, and the more you have, the better you are. But I also think we're in a day and age where I think we're moving away from true systems, to be honest with you, on offense. Like, if you look at guys playing college, the best teams on offense aren't really a true system. There's a lot of wing T principles in there. There's a lot of air raid passing game principles. There's tempo football. There's so many different things that are in there now that, like, I don't think there's anybody that really just plays one system, at least at the college level anymore. I mean, if you think about the true pro I teams or the pro teams, I mean, most of them suck on offense. So, if you look statistically at like the Big Ten, who probably has more, it's changed in the last 10 years, but the Big Ten probably has more under center pro style offenses than most conferences. I would guess they have three of the top five defenses in the nation. They have 8 or 9 of the top 40 defenses in the nation, and the reason is because they have zero of the top offenses in the nation. Now, I know Ohio State is decent on offense. I know Michigan at times can be decent on offense. If you look at passing statistics in the NCAA, nobody in the Big Ten throws the ball really well. So, um, you know, the teams that are playing pro style stuff in college, it really doesn't work out that well for them anymore. Even the Alabamas and the Georgias of the world are, there's pro theories in there, but it's not pro style under center anymore. It's way more shotgun stuff. Yes, they still run gaps and duo. Yes, there's still teams that run a ton of zone and wide zone in college, but I just think we're kind of going away from systems, and we're getting more to hybrid offenses that are versions of everything, right? So a lot of the spread football teams are all wing T in nature. A lot of the things they do are wing T-ish in nature. If you study a lot of spread football stuff, when Urban Meyer was coming up with all the stuff they were doing on offense, he's a wishbone guy. He was a Earl Bruce guy or a Woody Hayes guy at Ohio State. He was a wishbone guy, and he took the two fullbacks and he put them in the slot, and he zone read was a wishbone theory, that became triple option. And then all the access throws and now screens and all the shit off that it's triple option football. You're just not playing it the way they did, and the way that, maybe in the 70s or, the early 80s or whatever, or Homer Rice or those guys, like, they're not playing it that way, but it's still triple option football, and it's still 2x2. It's still wishbone. In theory, those guys are just now lined up in the slot. So that's the easiest way you can describe it. I know some people freak out and say, how is 2x2 wishbone? I'm not saying it is wishbone. I'm saying it's a derivative of the same thing. It's all triple option zone read is what they're trying to do. They're trying to leave somebody unblocked. There's give keep principles, and then there's give pitch principles. So, it's all off of certain deals, that read keys and what you're looking at. So it's all option football, however you look at it, which RPO is option football. I know that freaks people out, but RPO is 100% double option football, no matter how you look at it. So how do you handle individual skills, technique, time, and practice for scheme and install time? I think you always have to understand how, first of all, the time of the year, earlier on in camp, there's probably, even though you've got a ton of install going in, but you've also got a ton of indie. And then as the season starts to progress, you lose, unfortunately, skill positions, you lose more and more indie based on game plans and install and wrinkles and adjustments and team settings and group settings. I think the offensive and defensive linemen get more indie just because during specials, kick return, things like that they're not on, they can grab 10 minutes of indie. So, you got to know where you are at the time of year. You got to know what you need inside of your program. You got to know how much time you've got. It also changes for us. Like, we lose time with everything because we do have guys that play both ways, whether or not they start both ways, they're backups. So our practice plans look completely different than a conventional practice plan because, we only get a day and a half a week. We don't get a full 4 days a week or whatever. And most days we don't get the full allotted time because there's going to be 30 minutes set aside for, or certain periods set aside for the other side of the ball. And then when the other side of the ball has their day, there's going to be periods set aside for us. So it's a different way to practice. So you just got to manage figuring out based on results in games, what you need more of. Do you need more group settings? Do you need more individual settings? Do you need more technique settings? I think the good thing about practice plans is, you can go to clinics and you go to colleges and you can get the spreadsheet of their practice plans and how many periods they have. But the greatest thing about a practice plan is every coach can make their own one. You don't have to use anything that somebody else does. What works for you works for you. You don't have to follow Nick Saban's practice plan. You don't have those assistants. You don't have those GAs. You don't have those managers. You don't have all the things that you really need to do that anyway. So, what you videotape in practice is different at every school, how you use videotape at practice. So I think every school has their own unique setting, and you have to practice based on your staff, your players, the time constraints that you have. So, I say it all the time. The greatest thing about football is there's no one way to skin a cat. There's a lot of different ways to win games. There's a lot of different ways to play on offense, a lot of different ways to play on defense. There's a lot of different ways to practice. There's a lot of different, you know, methodologies or pedagogy to practice. There's guys that are physical all the time. There's guys that are hardly ever physical. There's guys that spend a ton of time in indie and drill work, and there's guys that spend less time there and a lot of time in group work. There's time, there's a bunch of guys that do a ton of half line. There's guys that never do half line. So, there's so many different moving pieces in high school football with where you're at, size of your staff, the types of coaches you have on your staff, who can you trust to do indie work. If you're a defensive coordinator and you coach the back end, can you do inside run at the same time you do skeleton? Can you trust your D-line coach and your linebacker coach to get everything right on inside run, or do you have to fix it off film while you're doing skeleton? Like, those are all the moving parts and different practices that you got to be able to piece together. What kind of service team or scout team looks are you going to get? What bodies do you have to give you the scout team looks that you need? What coaches do you have to run the scout team? So, I think coaches, a lot of time in general, the interesting part of the game is schemes. X's and O's are always going to be the interesting part of the game. I think it's what keeps everybody awake at night, figuring out schemes and play calls, and everybody loves that stuff. But the actual organization of practices and the actual, scout teams and scout cards and getting the right looks and having coaches that do that stuff, and how you do your special teams and who organizes the look on special teams. Do you have coaches that understand that they're 6 and 4 on kickoff? Please line them up like this. And the kicker likes to kick in these spots. So I need to see these kicks, and I need this punt protection for us this week. And I need, this punt block look. Like, those are all the things in coaching that I think a lot of people look past and don't understand how important they are, to be a good coach and a good teacher, to run a good program. Those things are all like really, really high level, big time important. Anybody can sit in an office and draw plays. Anybody can draw schemes. Anybody can go to a clinic and get a napkin and draw shit up. I mean, that's the easy part. When I say easy, it's not easy to execute, but it's easy to sit there and go, oh, this is great. This is a great idea. Oh, I like this. You see something on TV and you go, oh, shit, that looks really good. That's easy to do. Implementing it into a scheme, teaching it, organizing it, and practicing it is the hard part. So, ever thought about a video on under center passing game, favorite concepts, likes, dislikes, protections? Yeah, I mean, I grew up in under center passing game. So when I was a young kid and I was playing some quarterback, I had to learn how to 3-step drop, 5-step drop. They were still 7-step dropping, believe it or not. I'm old enough now, at 51 years old, I'm old enough now to remember when guys were actually 7-step dropping from under center. I remember when guys were taught on a clock with your footwork in the run game was all taught on a clock. So you're going to open to 4 o'clock. You're going to reverse out to 5 o'clock. I'm old enough to remember all that stuff from under center. So, maybe we could do, I could do a video on that. But a lot of the passing game doesn't change under center or shotgun. The drops of the quarterback change, and you always got to time up the routes with the drops. So, like your 3-step quick game from under center became punch one or, rocker step, or however you want to teach it to the quarterback in the shotgun because of the timing. Your 5-step drop in the shotgun became a 3-step drop from under center. They were basically the same thing because you had to get them to time up, where you needed them to time up. So you have all the numbers to practice, only offense, only defense. I've been at programs with it. We do not have enough backups, James, to do that. We have enough starters to do it. We can do some installs separately. We can do some walkthroughs separately. Once we start to practice and we get to scout teams and backups, and that's where we really start to get different. Like our backups at linebacker and safety and corner are a lot of receivers and offensive players. The offensive players' backups are a lot of our guys. They have a lot of personnel groupings that uses our linebackers and our guys. So to have a full practice like that, no, we're not able to do that. We have a strength coach, Coach Gardner, that runs it. I coach the weightlifting team, which is separate from our football stuff. So the weightlifting team that actually competes in pause, bench press, and clean and jerk, I coach that. We have a strength coach who has all the weight training classes during the day, and then he is the one that schedules our program. He does our year-round program. Our program starts in January. We give the kids off till January. Right now in class, he's kind of really a lot of maintenance lifts, a lot of recovery lifts. He doesn't really bust their balls until January starts. So I know there's a lot of guys that, when you lose, you get right back at it and you go hard and heavy. I think you need a little bit of a break mentally and physically. Um, I think kids, the wear and tear through a football season, their joints, I think you need to settle down a little bit. A lot of guys like to get right back at it and then, tell everybody that the grind never stops. Well, I think physically the grind every once in a while has to stop or at least slow down. So our guy does a great job with it. We'll ramp it up again in January. It'll all be geared towards peaking for spring football, and then we'll ramp it up again, and it'll be geared towards peaking, for the football season. So he does a really good job with the program and the scheduling of all of it. I just coach the weightlifting team, and I get some of the stronger guys to move as much weight as they possibly can. So our volume is way different. The lifts we do is way different. So, but that's how we do it at our place. Brazilian team playing at the national levels. Most of our guys are working adults. Yeah, I know a lot of guys, there's more guys trying to make football a career, but obviously it's tough to do, overseas where it's not as big of a game. You're battling soccer and some other deals. And, but I know the guys that I've dealt with, a lot of guys from Brazil, and I've done, I've done Zoom clinics with people in Germany and people in Panama and people in Brazil, and they've been awesome. The want to is there, the desire to learn, is awesome. But a lot of the guys are coaching and playing. A lot of the guys are 25 years old, working jobs with families and playing. So, definitely a different scene, which again, practice for you guys is probably completely different. You got to figure out a way that you can practice because you might not have enough bodies to practice. So you got to do half line stuff and you got to do more small group stuff. So again, that's the beauty of what we do and how we do it. So, you know, uh, I think that's what makes coaching fun. So getting back to the original comment though, what would have, if you guys had a vote, what are the four playoff teams if you had a vote in college football? My vote would have been Michigan, Washington, Texas, and Florida State. I think you win every game you play in a conference championship. You beat two SEC teams. I think they did enough to get in. Whether the quarterback's there or not, that's not really those kids' faults. That's not the coach's fault. It is what it is. Eye test, human nature, second string, third string quarterback. You can't compete with those teams. Maybe not. I think if you want to go eye test, I think you can put Georgia up against anybody in the country and they'd probably win 9 out of 10 times. I think Georgia would beat Washington 8 or 9 times. I think they beat Texas 8 or 9 times. Maybe not Michigan. I don't know. But I think they're all good football teams. I think Washington is physical as shit up front on the O-line. I haven't watched enough of their defensive stuff, but they are physical up front on the O-line. They do a great job. I think Texas, when they beat Alabama, I think that day they were the more physical team. So, eye test wise, it would probably be Georgia, Alabama, Michigan, and I would be up in the air with Texas, Washington, because I've seen Washington play some really good physical games, but they had a long stretch where they, didn't beat anybody by more than 10 points. So I ran a lot of the numbers today. The stats are really interesting. Washington is the worst defensively, statistically, of all those schools. Michigan is the best. Texas is the most well-rounded offense and defense statistically. All of them are in the top 40 in rush defense, which to me is always something that you got to look at when you're looking for the best teams in football. You got to be able to stop the run. Michigan's numbers are off the charts and everything because the Big Ten absolutely sucks on offense. I have no problem saying that. I think they play great defense. I think Jesse Minter does a great job. I think their coverage menu is pretty exotic. I know if you follow anybody that follows Cody Alexander on social media, I know he just did something on Michigan stuff today. But I think, but again, if you look at the stats, Iowa plays great D, Penn State plays great D, Nebraska was a top 30 defense, Rutgers was a top 30 defense. There were one or two others in there. I don't know if it was Wisconsin or not. But there were like 7 Big Ten teams in the top 30 in defense. But to me, it's because they're so abysmal on offense for whatever reason. They can't seem to get spread-orientated guys, whether or not they want to play that way or don't want to play that way. It seems to me like they try to play that way, but they end up recruiting, or getting a lot of the quarterbacks that aren't as much dual threatish as you would. Iowa's been great the last 2 years on defense. That's why this year Phil Parker got the Broyles Award as the top assistant, rightfully so. Their last 2 years, if you look at their numbers, they're absolutely phenomenal. Um, I don't watch Iowa a ton because they're four down based in nature, but they're usually four down quarters based. They do close the middle a bunch. I do like the fact that when you watch a lot of their five-man pressure, that it looks like they're playing with more eyes, vision, and break than they do match, carry, deliver. And I think that's why you see so many turnovers and pass breakups. The argument all the time between vision and break or match, carry, deliver is that match, carry, deliver is probably tighter throwing windows. And I would never argue that in a million years. But I think in high school, if you're going to be three under three deep, I think if you play with eyes and vision and break, I think your kids will make more plays. Match, carry, deliver is probably the quintessential way to match all the routes in the passing game when you're sending five and playing three under three deep. Yeah, they've pretty much been four down quarters for as long as we can remember, Joe. I know that for a fact, but they're good at it. They're really good at it, and obviously they're passing down stuff. They'll have some odd stuff or some exotic stuff, but if you tee it up and put it on, it's going to be four down most of the time. It's going to be quarter, half most of the time. They closed the middle more than I thought. Watching some games the last 2 or 3 days, they closed the middle more than I remember them closing the middle. A lot of three buzz, and then they closed the middle with their pressures. But they were phenomenal on defense. Penn State, I think, led the nation in sacks. They were pretty good on defense. But again, when you look at like some of those things are so hard to look at because, like I said, it's hard to determine how good they are because the offenses are so bad. I like what Texas did on offense and defense. Their numbers are really, really good. They're really sound, and they do a lot of great things on defense in a conference that plays pretty good offense. I think it was down on offense this year, the Big 12. Obviously, I think Washington maybe sees some better offenses than most other people do. I think Alabama certainly does in the SEC now, the way the game is played in the SEC with some of the teams in the West. So, numbers and stats get skewed sometimes. I think eye test, you can tell who plays really good defense when you watch games. But the other thing is when you watch like an Iowa play, a Michigan play, you watch Alabama, Georgia play, like the things they do up front with the D line, I don't know if that's feasible in high school. I mean, those guys are stonewalling blockers. They got their head right where it needs to be. The guys that are two gap and have a way to take blockers on, find where the ball's going, defend their primary gap, and then escape to a secondary gap. It's just amazing the things they can do. Like if you two gap in high school, 90% of the time you're just going to lag and be behind a block most of the time. You're almost never going to stone blocks, peek your head in what you think a primary gap is, and then disappear. Or even if you're a shade front team, or even if you're a one gap team, you don't see a ton of high school three techniques that destroy a guard with their helmet in the B gap and then gain a hat underneath, cross facing post snap, not pre snap, cross facing and escaping blocks. The way the Alabamas and the Georgias and the Iowas of the world, they're just so good with their hands and their hips and their feet. So powerful, so destructive. And that's the biggest difference. A lot of times in high school, we're trying to disrupt things. We're trying to penetrate. Like I know at least we are, because we're not going to build a wall at the line of scrimmage. We're not going to take people on and knock helmets backwards and get helmets in primary gaps to secondary gaps. That's just not how we're built. When you watch Iowa play, I mean, they are just crushing people at the line of scrimmage. The backers are able to fit and run, and the D linemen make plays off of their initial gap and their over front stuff. So they're fun to watch. So Big Ten teams on defense are certainly fun to watch if you can watch them play other people, right? So when you can watch some of those Big Ten defenses. So obviously now Iowa gets Tennessee in the Citrus Bowl. That'll be fun to watch. Simply because now you get to see that old school four down quarters based style against the new school wide splits, tempo, vertical run game, vertical passing game, all that stuff that makes it so much fun. So you get to see a combination. I think Alabama, Michigan is a great game. And I think it's a combination of two very similar styles. I know I just did another duo video last week. If you're a fan of duo over Inside Zone, watch Michigan, Alabama, because you're going to see it a ton. They will both run a ton of duo They'll do it from condensed sets. They don't run it as much from 11 open, 2x1, 3x1. Alabama will still RPO it at times. They don't RPO it as much with Jalen Milroe as they used to. Obviously LSU with Joe Burrow was huge on duo RPOs. So Michigan, Alabama is going to be a great one. I think Washington, Texas is a great one. I'm interested to see how Texas can play defense and hold up against Washington's passing game. Washington can get nasty up front and run the ball on you as well. So, I think that's going to be an interesting matchup. When I look at the bowl season, for me, it's normally selfish. I'm trying to find, for me, I usually try to find all the 3 down teams and all the 3 high teams that I can find. And I try to figure out what bowl games I want to watch off of that and off of those matchups, because I'm trying to learn, as much as I'm watching games. I know a lot of people get excited during bowl season. There's football almost every day. There's a ton of football games. I honestly really don't get that excited to watch football anymore unless I'm studying something. I very rarely watch games live. I think 25 years in the coaching business has kind of killed my desire to be a fan or to watch as a fan. Yes, I watch Alabama, but even when I watch Alabama, I find myself constantly sinking back into looking at the back end, looking at coverages, looking at pressures. Like, I can't just watch the game. I can't watch the game like I used to growing up as a fan. I can't root anymore because I end up my mind wanders into, oh, hey, they're playing that front. Hey, they're playing that coverage. Or, hey, that was that RPO. Or, hey, look what they just did with that FIB motion stuff and eye candy for all the power stuff. And look at that read game. So unfortunately, I've lost my ability. I wouldn't say that I don't enjoy it per se, but I don't really I don't watch a ton of games live anymore. I wait for them to come out on YouTube, or if I get my hands on all 22, I'd rather go back and watch things a million times, even if it's a TV angle. You see one replay, you see something else, you watch a game again, you go back and you go, oh shit, that's what they were doing. I just think the more I can watch things and watch them at my own pace and slow down what I want to slow down and go back and look at what I want to look at. Alabama's about the only games I watch live anymore. When Iowa State played Kansas State, I tried to watch that because those are both 3 high teams. I tried to watch Nebraska when they were on this year because they're playing some 3-3 stuff. But, again, for me, I'm always trying to kind of, navigate my way to the games that I want to learn if I'm going to watch anything live. I have no desire to watch random teams live, even if there's football on, and I think the other thing at least for me, I don't know, by the time Saturday, Sunday comes, I'm spent on football, especially if I'm doing YouTube stuff and I'm doing other things. There's so much football by Saturday, Sunday that I don't want to watch it, live unless there's, again, something interesting right now for me to watch. I rarely watch NFL games live. I am not a fan of NFL football. I think there's some things that they do now that I think some of the third down stuff and some of the exotic sims and creepers, and I think that's something that I can watch a little bit, but I'm not a fan of NFL football. I'm not a fan of, I think it's so much different than high school football. I think college is different, but I think it's closer. I think football is just such a world remove, that there's not a lot for me to gain from watching NFL football. Now, I do have a fantasy team like most people. I do have DraftKings like most people. So yeah, I'll watch that stuff, but watching games, for the enjoyment of watching a game, I'm kind of past that in my life now. I decided when I'm trying to learn to get better, I need a couple of weeks. Yeah, I think it takes me some time too, Coach Gardner, to figure out. I think the first thing that you need anything you learn is never going to hurt. But I think the first thing you need to figure out is what direction you're going the next season. Are you staying with what you do and you want to get better at it? Do you need to switch from even to odd? Or are you switching from middle of the field open to middle of the field close? I think before you choose a direction, I think you got to figure out what the direction is before your research season and your clinic season. And, I know at my place, between myself and the head coach, who's the offensive coordinator, we're always trying to find smaller school programs that do things that we can both, is there somebody out there that's playing 3 down? And, the magic bullet for us is there somebody out there that's 3 high and whatever we want to do on offense. Whatever it is that we think we're going to do on offense. If we could find that place, that would be to me. I think right now the magic bullet would be. I know they got destroyed this past week and they had some shitty games, but Oklahoma State schematically for me, I enjoy what they do on offense. They played a ton of three high on defense this year. So, Iowa State would always be a dream for me with the three high stuff, but I'm not really in love with what they do on offense. It's good. Um, and they do a good job with it. It's just a lot of big personnel that um, I haven't been able to find in high school, but that's the way the game's moving. So, Iowa State was doing the 12 and 13 personnel stuff before a lot of other people were. And, that's something to definitely look at how they use those guys. If you can find them, if you're a 12 personnel guy, that's Iowa State is somebody I would look at more now on offense with, 12 personnel, 13 personnel, Y off, H off stuff. With one attached or both of them off or one attached with two more off, that stuff that I would be more inclined to now than I was a couple years ago. When Iowa State first started playing three high, I had no desire to watch them on offense. I was just in a different mode at that time. We were more 11 or 20 personnel, 10 personnel. Now the way the world's going and at the school I'm at now, I think we've got bodies. I don't call anything on offense, but I think we've got some body. Now, they might be linebackers, but I think we've got some bodies that, uh, could be those H and Y off guys, those travel guys, those guys that could pull and insert on backers, those guys that could get to the flat and be part of your RPOs and, guys that you could quick motion and escort for the quarterback run game. Like, I think we have those kids. So I'm more interested in that now. Than ever before. I don't really know, like offensively this year. I don't really know what I would. I always like watching Ole Miss. I always like watching Chip Kelly. They weren't as good this year, but I really don't know. Now that I've been out of offense for 2.5 years or whatever it is now, I really don't know what direction I would go on offense anymore. I don't know where I would lean with that, but yes, the Iowa State stuff is probably anti three high. It's probably adding gaps, bigger bodies, trying to give you, or at least confuse your fits off of three and things like that. So I mean, ironically, yeah, they're probably closest to the anti three high of teams, even though they play three high defense. So just past 9 o'clock, guys. Been on here from. Oh, that's awesome, Coach Gardner. I love that. He plays well. Yeah, I'm not so sure about that. I think that was a flash in the pan, P Block. I think that was portal built, bunch of transfers, strike while the iron's hot, get yourself some early wins. But I think you start to see the true colors. Obviously, um, you got to get talent. And the scary thing to me is if it's somebody like Dion's building it through the portal straight away, they've got like the 67th ranked recruiting class right now. It's just absurd how bad it is. That just tells me that it's 1 year. 1 year when his sons are done, he might be done. I can't buy into that yet. I can't buy into Colorado as a program yet. I can't buy into what was it exciting? Yeah. Am I a huge Dion fan? When he was a player, he was one of my favorite players growing up. Coaching wise, I'm not sold yet. I thought his coordinators were doing a great job, and then he kind of screwed that up and jacked around with them. But when you're trying to rebuild a program and you have some early success and you're the 67th ranked recruiting class with all the publicity Colorado got and all the publicity Deion Sanders gets and all what you would think would be the ability to use some NIL stuff off of Deion's name and the things that they were doing. You've got the 67th ranked recruiting class. That tells me that you don't want to spend your time and effort there. That you don't want to invest in recruiting. You want to build through the portal. That's tells me that I don't know how long that's going to last. And it tells me he may be out the door in a year or two. So those quarterbacks all went to the same high school. That's pretty damn good. Pretty impressive, I must say. But just past 9 o'clock, going on over an hour now. So appreciate all you guys being here. I appreciate all my old Long Island friends, my former coach, Joe Del Gaze. Conversations are great tonight. We'll do it again next week. And I feel like next week will be, if we can get all the same bodies on here and the same people, I think next week would be a really good night to just go X's and O's and just go all scheme, straight ball. I thought with the college football playoffs, it would be an interesting topic. And then, obviously you're trying to generate interest on a YouTube live. So I thought maybe more people would chime in. Yeah. Can you wait till at least 6:30 a.m. to text me tomorrow? Thank you. I thought there'd be more people getting on just to talk about the playoffs. But I think with the lineup of people that I see here, of people that I know and people that have been on here before, I think we could probably get an all schematic X's and O's. I think we can get a couple good debates on here, a couple healthy debates here, whether they be offensive, defensively, philosophy, schemes. I think we could have some real healthy debates on here. I think there's a lot of good football guys on here, and we can create kind of and that's always what I wanted YouTube Live to be anyways. I wanted it to be a professional discussion or a sounding board, for people to get on here with ideas, throw them out there, and other guys say, well, we tried that. Here's what didn't work. Here's what did work. Here's what we do. I mean, that to me is what YouTube Live should be all about. And, like when you do YouTube videos, I don't, the only interaction is through a comment after the video. I don't interact with anybody. So to be able to interact with people live, even though I can't see people and you just see, my face that's made for radio, that part of it sucks, but to interact with questions and comments immediately for somebody to say, hey, coach, can you talk about the lag technique? Hey, coach, can you talk about pass protection? Hey, coach, can you talk about what you would do versus this personnel, that personnel group? So, to me, the YouTube Live sets up as a great forum, a great interaction piece, a great way to ask some questions, give your ideas, and see what other people do. And so hopefully next week, if we can get some of the same bodies on, if you guys are all here, I think we're starting to get into a window now where Tuesday nights are a really good night. There's no college football on until bowl season. Everybody's chomping at the bit. Most coaches have just ended their season, so they're, chomping at the bit to get better and to learn. And football's still kind of on your mind. We're not totally at Christmas yet. So next Tuesday, if I can get on next Tuesday, we will crank it up. All ball, all schemes, philosophy, everything related to football. I won't mention college football. I won't mention NFL. I won't mention any of that stuff. So appreciate all you guys being here tonight. Stay safe. Hopefully the holiday season is good to you. I will definitely talk to you before Christmas time, but look for a video tomorrow. I just need a topic. I don't know what I'm going to do it on yet, but need to get a YouTube video out tomorrow on my planning period. And then next week, let's do it up again. All ball, schemes, philosophy. Let's get this thing rolling. Remember, you won't play well until you play fast. Thank you guys so much. See you next time.